All right. Hey, Grayson, how you doing?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Doing great. I think these will come out once courses start back up. I'm currently quarantined for pre-Christmas events, so I'm kind of losing my mind a bit at home. But hey, thanks for joining us. This is, I guess, the spring semester installment of this. It's been a lot of fun, and thank you for joining me. And I think this will be really interesting because you are our first campus minister that we get to kind of talk with. We've kind of done some other ministry positions. So I think this will be fun. So we'll start off, Grayson. Tell us kind of the basics, where you're living, your ministry context, and kind of about your family life. We'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, first, thanks for having me. I think
Yeah.
this is pretty cool to, with a lot of us just being off campus, it's cool to kind of see names and faces, maybe other than just in a classroom setting, so you can kind of get to know the person, people who are going to HST. So it's. I'm glad you're doing this. But in terms of my family, I have been married to my wife for a little over 5 years. Her name's Amanda, and we have a little boy who's a little over 18 months old named Shepherd. He's the best little dude, but man, I know this is coming out in the spring, but right around holiday season, it's fun. That's the nice way of putting it. He's a fun little ball of joy, but he is the best. But we are at Crowley's Ridge College in Paragould, Arkansas, which is northeast Arkansas, really close to Arkansas State and Jonesboro and that kind of vicinity in that area.
Mhm.
But we do, like you said, we do college ministry, we do campus ministry, and we actually started this campus ministry, or were asked to start this campus ministry starting in August or July, I guess. But technically, August, whenever school started back up, was when we started having events and we're officially kind of running and going. But what kind of led us here was, Amanda and I, we met at a public university. We met at Arkansas Tech University um, through a college ministry there called, at the time, was called the Church of Christ Student Center, which is funded mostly by my home church, Westside Church of Christ in Russellville, Arkansas. And so, you and I were talking a little bit beforehand, like campus ministry is, it's kind of in my blood. My parents met at that same student center, at that same college ministry. My brother met his wife there. And of course, I met my wife there too. And that time when we were in college ministry, we had a new campus minister at that time. I don't want to get into the details, but there was so many goods and so many bads that went through my time when I was in college. And I think that anybody who has gone through that experience of going to college, being involved in campus ministry, knows that that point in your life is maybe arguably a window of time where you're so moldable and influenced for better or for worse. And so there were so many good things and really difficult things that happened when I was in college ministry. In fact, by the time I graduated, I wasn't even sure exactly what I wanted to do. When I was in, like a junior or a sophomore or junior in college, I knew I wanted to go into campus ministry. But by the time I graduated, so many things had gone on that I really wasn't really sure anymore. My faith was really rocky, and I think a lot of students go through that at least some point when
Oh
they
yeah.
are in when they're in college. So after I graduated, after my wife and I graduated, we did youth ministry for a few years at a church a little outside of Russellville. But then that kind of led us to Fayetteville, Arkansas, or the Springdale area for I think 2 or 3 years, where we did youth ministry there at a church called Robinson Avenue Church of Christ,
Yeah.
and I loved that church. It was amazing. But there was a time when we were there, both at an individual level. Amanda and I both felt a calling. It was so cool. We both felt a calling to get back into the thing that one caused us a lot of hurt, but two that we knew we loved so much. It was such a pivotal time in our lives to get back into that thing. And so I contacted Chris Buxton, who at the time was director of Wolf Life Campus Ministry at Arkansas State, and we did an apprenticeship there for a couple years, learned how to do it, the day to day, the long term. And so really through a cool series of events wound up over here just a few miles away from there
Yeah.
at Crowley's Ridge College in Paragould, Arkansas, which before then I think they had kind of they had some systematic way of doing college ministry, um, but they kind of wanted to revamp that and re-up it to something more official and something more organized. And so President Richard Johnson, who, man, he's an awesome guy. I'm so thankful for the people that I work with. invited me to come start this up. So our college ministry is, our campus ministry is the Ridge Connection, which is really to help students connect to God, to connect to other people, and to, more than anything, connect on campus, to love their experience and their time on campus. And so it's been quite a time to start that. You hit the ground running, you want to meet students, you want to be on campus. But of course, with the pandemic, you're kind of limited on what you can do. I tell you, man, I mean, people are thirsty for the word. People are thirsty for relationships, and God's a lot. This is so, you might hear this, but I don't think you might understand it until you're in it, that God can do more than we kind of ask or imagine, even over Zoom, which is not my preferred medium of communication, but it's been cool. So we've been here since August and been loving it, man. We love campus. We love the students. And again, I think I was telling you before this, I think I'm the only campus minister that I know of that's actually employed by a college. Most other campus ministers that I know are employed by a church or a congregate body of churches. But it's been really cool, man. It's been kind of a fun experience so far, and hope we're here for a really long time. CRC is a really small Christian college, which is pretty neat. But as with, the same problems at Arkansas State are kind of the same problems with students here at CRC too. People are looking for vision, for purpose, for meaning. It's been cool so far. So we're excited to be here anyways.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was going to ask you, but you kind of answered it. What the differences are in working kind of under an apprenticeship or working with a state school and then a Christian school. I think students.
Well, and sort of the gentleman who kind of ran stuff before now, his name is Paul McFadden, who is now the AD over here at CRC. He's sort of, I have a governing body, people that I answer to. He's kind of the main person that I answer to. But it's really cool, in terms of accessibility to campus, being kind of on the inside of what's happening on campus is a thing that's much different than maybe I experienced at Arkansas State, at A State or at Tech, for instance. You're kind of your own autonomous body, and we are here too. But there you're just kind of, you're more working around the schedule of everything else, and just hoping things work. Whereas now that we're here, we at least have a foot in the door on the long-term vision on things that are happening on campus. And we are an integral part of that, which is really pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. How many students do you kind of have access to, or that you kind of get to work with?
Well, I think at CRC, I think there's around 200 students, which is pretty small, but it honestly makes things a lot more accessible, because again, I have access to kind of like, not student databases, but like the people that have information on students and phone numbers and things like that. I have access to that. And so when we first got here, the campus is not all that big. It's probably about the size of HST in terms of just square footage. It was really cool to just be able to walk on campus and just see who all is where. It's kind of like a small town, for better or for worse, everybody knows everybody. And so a lot of students, it's hard not to run into people. I'll just put it that way. I mean, people, everybody and everybody knows you, which is, again, much different than the college experience that I had, but that lends itself to a lot of different ways to disciple others, and to be present on campus and to be visible, which sometimes when you're at other state or public universities, you can be hosting your own event or doing your own thing, and others don't even know that you're there, whereas on a campus like this, we're pretty easily visible, which is pretty neat and advantageous.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting, but it might feel like a small school, but 200 people, that's a decently sized church.
Yeah.
You can give it like, this is my people that I'm pastoring to, and kind of, like you said, being present to. That's really neat.
And even though it's small, man, it serves as like a real microcosm to other colleges. I mean, it's once you get in there and you're working with college students, there's really no difference. I mean, college students are still struggling with the same things. The vibe is the same. Things that students want to talk about are the same on a private campus and a public campus. People still desire more. And it's interesting too. And I've talked to other ministers that at least function somewhat on a Christian campus. Um, Again, I think that desire to go deeper, it can arguably be harder to have a relationship with Jesus possibly on a Christian campus than it is on a public campus, because everything that you're dealing with is somewhat Christian. You go to chapel every day, you have Bible classes, and all those things can serve to be really advantageous for your faith. But from some of the students that I've talked to, that can cause you to be dismissive to even talking about faith in a setting that isn't chapel or isn't, some sort of event that is going on, on a Christian campus, So, but I've been really pleased to how we've been able to kind of like break through some of those barriers. For instance, like on Wednesday nights, what we're doing all year long is just going through the Gospel of Mark, like making it very simple. With everything that has happened in 2020, what can we talk about that will cover all the bases? And in my instance, it was just, in my thought, it was just, let's just talk about the story of Jesus, because he kind of hits on all these things in that gospel. So students are receptive, students are open. And I would just argue that those same challenges that you find at a public university, you're going to find that on a Christian campus too. So sure. Students are students, they still struggle with the same things.
Gotcha. Man, that's really interesting. That's a good little conversation. So what has been your journey to HST? So you're doing campus ministry now. Kind of, how did you hear about Harding? Because it doesn't really seem like you have Harding ties. So what brought you to taking courses at HST?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was at Arkansas Tech, there was always one thing Chris Buxton implemented, I think when I was younger, before I went to Tech, was something called an apprenticeship, which is what I did with him at Arkansas State. And part of that requirement was to be involved in a graduate study program. And of course, he went to HST, and people that I've come in contact with far before then, HST was what you did, and especially with me, who, yes, I grew up in a Church of Christ, and I have, deep Christian heritage, in that sense. I didn't have, a Christian degree or a Bible degree for my undergraduate setting. Like I went to Arkansas Tech, got a communications degree, partially because I knew I wanted to do ministry, but all along I kind of wanted to go into a graduate program. And honestly, whether it was one of the first ways that I heard of HST at Harding, there was a couple things. One, that was just part of the apprenticeship. So I kind of knew about that even when I was at Tech and wasn't doing the apprenticeship. The apprentices at the time were doing that. And so I kind of heard of it before then. But secondly, I remember there's a college ministry conference called Gulf Coast Getaway, who Matt Carter every year was there with the HST tent, so he was an obvious guy, and that was an obvious setting to kind of learn more about that. And so honestly, from even when I was pursuing my bachelor's degree, knew I wanted to go into something like this. Like that was kind of the plan all along. And Harding it was the obvious choice. I mean, I looked at some other places, but HST was what I knew I wanted to do. So after I graduated from Tech, I kind of worked around Russellville for a little bit. Again, it was a really weird time for me. We really just don't have time to get into. Maybe we'll have like a part 3, 4, and 5 after this. Just really digging in on me. But it was 2016 when we were doing my first youth ministry job at Mountain George Church of Christ, which is just a small church outside of Russellville. Love that place. Love those people. But I started it in 2016 and taking the long route, but I'm ready to be done. But I'm doing my MACM. So far, man, like, I've had people like asking me like why I'm not overloading on some classes or trying to get done sooner. But this graduate program and the way it's designed, I'm so thankful, not only because of the connections that you make with people, but like I'm legitimately loving the classes. So like 1 or 2 classes a semester as a distance student, full-time working. Yeah. So ideal. And like, I'm loving it, and not only is it just difficult in nature, but it forces you to look at scripture in many different lights, from people from all different backgrounds. But of course, the professors are just incredible, so started in 2016, I think the spring, and I think I have maybe a year or two left. So I'm getting there, but it's taking some time. So.
Gotcha. What are you taking, I guess, this semester? When this comes out, it'll be this semester.
When this is coming out, I'm taking preaching, I think, with Dr. Bland, or one of the preaching courses. And I had him. I'm so glad to take him again because I took him for my very first class, which was ministry roles and relationships. Loved that class. And I haven't taken him since, so I'm super excited. Maybe by the time this comes out, I'll be able to tell you more. But so far, he's been great. I'm thankful to take him again. So,
awesome. So you're just doing the one class?
Just this next semester, yeah. Because we, as a college, we had to shift so many things to the spring semester.
Oh yeah.
Sporting events. Some of our events have been, we had a fall retreat scheduled that we've had to push, and so just time wise, I know I won't have time for two, because so much of our fall stuff got pushed to the spring. So hopefully, as I'm taking this class, as you're watching this, I won't be crying because of how busy everything is, but yeah, so I'm just taking that one this next semester.
Gotcha. Okay, so last question before we get to the speed round. Hopefully the trash bin just pulled up, so my dogs are now on guard duty. So what has kept you spiritually healthy through COVID, but maybe now that hopefully we're on the kind of end of this, just over your time in campus ministry and ministry as a whole, what's kept you spiritually healthy?
Yeah. I would say two things immediately come to mind for me, other than maybe just the things that come to mind in terms of, you got, as a minister, it can be easy to not be in the Word, but you got to be in the Word, got to be in prayer. But beyond those couple things that are maybe the most obvious things, the first thing is, and this is maybe a personality thing for me, and I think a lot of ministers are like this too. I have got to know when to say no. Like whether there is a building up of stress within me, as a minister, you serve other people, which means other people come to you and ask you for things, which is part of it. And that's what I love to do. And I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, which means I love to help people. I love to be with people. That's what gives me energy. That's what gives me meaning. That's what gives me purpose. And while that's true, some time can go by and I can realize how exhausted that I am. And I don't take advantage of that. That doesn't mean that you just say no to say no. That doesn't mean that you know when to step away and that you take advantage of that time. Of course not. But I've got to know when to say no. And I think that maybe some of our minister friends need to hear that too, that it's okay to make space for yourself and to say no, that I need to heal. I need to spend some time alone with the Lord. I need to spend some more time with my family. So maybe knowing your priorities and knowing when to say no are kind of lumped into one. And 2, I know that I've got to have my people that I'm vulnerable with and can be honest with. Because only Grayson knows what's going on in Grayson's heart. And sometimes I don't even know what's going on internally. I think that I do, but sometimes I really don't. So I've got to have my people. So obviously my wife, she can sniff out when I'm not okay, even when I don't know that I'm not okay. So I'm glad that she has that spiritual gift. But beyond that, man, some of those people that I went to college with, and you might be interviewing some of these people now, but I went to college with a guy named Cade Richards, who goes here to HST. He's graduating soon. He's campus minister over there at Fort Smith. Man, me and him are just really close. And he is the guy that I call when things are not okay, or when there's just a feeling in me that that something's wrong, something's off. That he's just the guy that I go and talk to. And there's a couple other guys like that that I know, and no one's going to make me reach out to them. And so I've got to have the self-discipline to say, I need help. I'm not okay. I'm reaching out to you. Whether you give me advice or just are there to listen, I've got to have my people. And so I said 2 things, but a third thing is obviously kind of in tandem with some of those other things, but get counseling. I'm so pro counseling. Like, right. It is as crazy as 2020 was. I spent a good majority of 2019 in counseling, just talking about things that I didn't know were below the surface, and I don't even care to talk about that because I don't know if there's still a stigma on counseling, but it's so, my goodness, like if you're listening to this and I don't even know if you're wondering if you need counseling. You need counseling, okay? Because we all need it, whether it's a tune-up or whether it's just to see what's going on internally. Man, I'm so pro that. Can't talk about that enough. But I would say knowing when to say no, knowing your boundaries, knowing your limitations, knowing your priorities, and knowing your people that you've got to be disciplined to being vulnerable with
Yeah,
are so important.
man, those are so good. Especially, I think I try to imagine your context of, I'm sure there's college students who
Yeah,
could eat up all of your time
yeah,
nonstop.
yeah,
But it's important to be able to say no and give yourself space.
yeah,
Yeah, and I'm all for. I think the counseling thing has been mentioned a few times in these
yeah,
conversations, and it's so true, man. That's so
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Okay, so
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was you can go ahead because we'll get into the speed round questions.
Well, just real quickly, what I was going to say was, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think in any ministry context, you're with your people, and so if I'm around college students all the time, like I need people who are in your 30s. Like I need people who are not college students at times, and I think any minister needs to be very clear about those boundaries they set. Like on this day, unless it's just a dire emergency, don't call me. Like if you don't need me, don't call me. And I know college students respect that, because what that tells them is my wife and my kid are so important to me, and this is holy day. You don't contact Grayson on this day, obviously, unless you just really need to. So making sure your congregation or your people know what your boundaries are, I think is a good thing. So
Yeah, and I think that also sends a really important message to your college students of saying, oh, like it's a good thing to prioritize your family and your wife
absolutely,
or your spouse and your children.
100%.
You might not be saying that, just blatantly, but they pick up on that.
Well, and they will, and this as well as I do, they will remember things like that more than they will what I teach on a Wednesday or a Sunday. Like they'll remember the way that I treated my wife and my family and them and my coworkers and my team. They'll remember all those things probably a little bit more than any particular thing that I say when I teach.
That's right.
That's always kind of the way it is.
Yeah. Which kind of hurts, I think, as people.
Oh yeah.
It kind of hurts a little bit, but
Oh, 100%. You're like, why don't you just take what I'm telling you on Wednesdays?
That's right. Hey, well, let's get into our speed round and we'll wrap it up. I changed. I don't know if you've been watching, but I've changed one of these questions, so hopefully you'll pick up on that. Okay. So, if you could eat dinner with one person from the Bible, who would it be, in one sentence? Why?
Oh man, I think my knee-jerk reaction would be Peter.
Okay.
One because that wouldn't be a quiet dinner. There will always be something to talk about, and that he'll probably be filling the talking space more than I would be. But more than that, I mean, I would just love to know. I think just more about what was happening with him internally when people, with what's not recorded, or things that were happening with him internally when nobody was watching him. That's one thing that I'm really big on, is just being a person of integrity when people aren't watching you. And I would love to know kind of the inner workings on what was happening with Peter during his entire journey. Obviously, more importantly, when he was with and journeying with Jesus, because we know that he's become such a cornerstone. But I would like to know. I would just like to know more about Peter.
Oh man, that's a great one. Favorite book you've read this past year?
Oh, I don't have it with me. What is that called? Oh, it's called The Ministry of Social Media. And I can't even remember the author's name right now, but it's by a woman and she is incredible. But you talk about something that's so telling of our time. It's a lady who's a minister who used to work for Facebook. And I think she still has ties with them. And if you have show notes or you have a description, I'll send that to you after this, because I can't recall who the author was. It's called The Ministry of Social Media. And it really goes to the inner workings of the importance of having an online presence, which is obviously really important on what we're doing nowadays. I don't think it's still the most ideal thing that we would like to do as ministers. We're people. We love to be with people. But we are transitioning. You see a shift, like when things are quote unquote better, the importance of having an online presence to meet people where they're at and be very personable and to go deeper than, the surface level is important. And she kind of goes through some of those really practical things, which are the importance of building a Facebook community or just online presence in general. It's really good.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So, the speedrun question used to be, how would you describe 2020 in one word? But I want to get away from that negativity. So
Okay.
for now, it's going to be, what is one word that you would like 2021 to be described as? Like, what's one word that shows hope for 2021 for you?
That's good. I think my answer for both might be the same. And I think it's the word opportunistic.
Okay.
Because I think it's hard to maybe separate the answer to those two questions because they're so linked together. I mean, obviously, but I think opportunistic because the 2020 has been a year of learning. It's obviously been really difficult. We don't have to talk about the negative side of things because I think everybody knows, but I think both have served as an opportunity to do more in terms of, I think, creativity in our ministry. I think it's been challenging for, at an individual level for us to do what we talked about and to make sure we are spiritually and emotionally healthy. But in terms of ministry related things, this has been an opportunity for us to become creative in the way that we reach people, because maybe all this happened for a reason, believe it or not. Like maybe things in church and online presence wise and discipleship, maybe all that is going to look different, and maybe it's for the betterment of the church. I wish that I could say that I had all those answers on what that would look like. But the truth is that I believe that these things have happened so that for some sort of opportunity. And so I think for the church to be able to see 2020 and 2021 as an opportunity to further our vision, to further our casting, to figure out how we're reaching people more effectively. For me and my contacts, how does this mean that I minister to college students differently? Does this mean getting out of my comfort zone and doing more Zoom meetings? I mean, or just things like that.
Yeah.
Or what does that look like? So I would say, to answer both questions, opportunistic, because as difficult as it is, as people of the Bible, we have to believe that difficult times are a cause for more opportunities. What that means, we just got to keep grinding and figuring out and feeding off of each other as fellow ministers. Like, what are you doing? What are some ideas? That doesn't mean that you sit in your office all day and try to figure it out all by yourself. That just means that you lean into people, make sure you're spiritually and emotionally healthy, and see how you can reach people better.
That's right. I think I like that. And I like how you made 2020 and 2021. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. What is one thing that you love about the city that you live in?
The city that I live in, of course, you spent some time in Jonesboro, so you kind of know this. And I think this is true for where we are in Paragould. For better or for worse, people love to be with people, which has been a little bit challenging this past fall. But people get their energy in life by being with people, whether that's sharing meals in each other's homes, or that's in terms of college students on our campus, people enjoy their alone time, but people also love time with people. So much so that it makes things a little bit harder as a minister to organize and be logistical about things. But people love to be with people. I think that's where we are in Northeast Arkansas anyways. It's in the Paragould. It's what can we do to be with people, which again leads to a lot of opportunities, leads to a lot of maybe challenges logistically, but that's at the heart, I would say, of NEA and Paragould is just, and we just love being with each other. We love hanging out with each other. We don't have to be doing anything, but I want to be present with you, which is, what more can you ask for from people,
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's not always the case.
So, hey, man, those are really good answers. I appreciate that. And Grayson, it has been so good we've never met before, so this is our first time chatting. Yeah. It's been really a blessing for me, and hopefully it's been a blessing to you. And I appreciate you jumping on this call with us today.
Reed, thanks, man. You're about an hour and a half from me, so I need to take a trip up to Memphis sometime soon. And
I would say we could go get some barbecue or wings or something, but I don't know what's open and not open now.
I know we'll have to get the drive-through and go back to HST's campus and social distance. But
Right.
man, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Have a good one, Grayson.
Thanks.
Yeah.